At what moment did you realize that the person you knew was a real psychopath? When I was little, my neighbor had hamsters. Once, when I was at her place, she started squeezing the hamsters in her hands, so they got away somehow. She thought it was funny. She just squeezed them more and more. I told her to stop because she was hurting them, but she just laughed. The next day, I asked her grandma what happened with the hamsters. She said not all of them died. Another time, we were making sandwiches in her room. Heather, why LOL? She cornered me with a knife and started laughing. A few years later, I saw her photo on a wanted poster.
For several years, my father kept telling me that a boy I knew from elementary school was a psychopath, all because he often got into fights with random people and didn't feel any emotions after breaking their bones. Plus, he often lied about the school staff to cause them trouble. I thought he was a bit cruel and scary, but overall seemed like a normal kid. A couple of years ago, I found out he was sentenced to life for murders. When I was 7 or 8 years old, there was a boy about 6 years old living nearby. Once, we found a little bird that had fallen out of its nest. While I was thinking about running home and telling one of the adults, he ran over the poor bird with his bike and started laughing. The last thing I heard about him was that he's sitting in jail for beating up his girlfriend. Go to hell, Kevin. I work as a librarian. This guy studied at our college. He was a charming and handsome guy, but completely empty inside. No compassion, no emotions, disrespect for others. One of our staff members outright said, "This boy is a psychopath." She was a social worker, so I believed her. He targeted women and seduced them. He told me how he seduced a married woman with a military background and made her do sexual things she didn't want to do. After he got bored with her, he thumped her. In the end, he got a master's degree and now works on a military base, earning a lot of money and making everyone do the work for him. It seems to me that one of my professors at university was a sociopath. He was a brilliant specialist in his field, but as a person, he functioned completely incorrectly. He set strange rules for behavior in class. He had a strong personal bias against people, mainly based on things like their haircut. There were rumors that because of him, some people committed suicide. He spoke very nastily to those who failed their final exams. And the way he smiled like a little boy caught by his grandmother while sneaking cookies. He also told people that their years of study were wasted. When I was 8 years old, I allowed my 12-year-old cousin to hold my hamster. She played with it very roughly, and I told her to put it back in the cage. She got very angry, stared at me for about 2 minutes, and then turned around and threw the hamster against the wall. The hamster died immediately. Seeing that my hamster was killed right in front of my eyes, I burst into tears. After she killed it, I realized that something was wrong with her. My mom immediately called my aunt and told her to take my cousin away. She was no longer allowed near me or my pets. It has been 4 years since I last communicated with her. Apparently, she constantly got into fights and beat up her opponents so badly that they had to go to the hospital. Now she is undergoing therapy and has already served time in a correctional facility. All my brothers and sisters are afraid of her. Many of us think that eventually she will kill someone. Personally, I believe the best place for her is a psychiatric hospital. I knew a person who was later found guilty of 14 murders. During an interview about his childhood and personal life, it turned out that he had no attachment to other people. For him, his girlfriend and child were just ordinary NPCs from video games. He was part of a gang, but he simply copied his behavior from other members. He had a girlfriend only because other guys had girlfriends. He had a trendy car and clothes. Others quickly realized that he didn't care at all about the murders and shootings, so they made him kind of a killer. During the interrogation, he was extremely polite, but showed absolutely no emotions. He did not try to lie or downplay the terrible things that had happened to him, or that he had committed himself. I remember the moment when I realized that he was a former psychopath. At night, we were sitting on his bed and I asked him to tell me about himself. Even though we were dating, I didn't know anything about him and he couldn't tell me anything about himself except superficial facts. I looked into his eyes and saw emptiness. I understood why I could never emotionally read him or get any kind of emotion in response. After we broke up, he told me that he couldn't feel emotions and that it was awful. I realized he was a psychopath only several years later. Before we started dating, he would tell me with a smile how manipulative he was. He constantly lied about everything and he had 15 other relationships before me, all of which ended within a month. That was a warning sign that I ignored. He jumped from religion to atheism and back every 2 months. He was very attractive and popular, liked by many people. He loved to flirt, loved to take risks for no reason, and always got into trouble. A few years ago, I had to put my cat Rex to sleep. He was 21 years old. Recently, I told this to my friend, whom I've known for over 35 years. Suddenly, he said to me, "I've always liked killing cats." I asked him twice if he was joking. He wasn't joking. Since then, I haven't spoken to him. I'm just shocked by what some people can say to those who have pets. I told a friend that I'm barely funding the money for the medical procedures my cat needs, and that without them, he would most likely die. I wasn't asking for help or advice. He just told me to screw off. He said he could solve the problem for 50 cents. When I asked how, he replied that that's how much a bullet costs. I played football with a hot-tempered guy from middle school. He enjoyed rough play, even during practice. The coach constantly had to stop him. Everyone hated him and stayed away from him. A few years later, because of marijuana, he killed my classmate. He hid the body under a pile of leaves in his backyard. When I heard this news, I wasn't surprised at all. Under a pile of leaves? Seriously, such a villain and at the same time so stupid. What a combo. The obsession people have with Ted Bundy, a serial killer, because of his good looks as well as his intelligence and charisma, creates a false impression of psychopaths. People think that psychopaths and serial killers plan everything out and are unlikely to ever be caught. But if you spend time and study other serial killers well, it turns out that they weren't caught in time mostly because of police incompetence in investigations or because of the general public's indifference toward the type of victims they preferred. Bundy chose victims who were middle class, young, white, attractive women. That's what made him famous, along with the number of his victims. And Bundy somehow managed to cross state borders without raising suspicion. Other serial killers who chose prostitutes, people of color, gay people, transgender people, or marginalized individuals as their victims often killed many more people, and they often operated for a much longer period of time because no one cared about the people they were killing. People simply didn't care about them and no one was looking for them. And this isn't limited to the 80s or earlier decades. The Green River Killer chose only prostitutes as his victims and avoided law enforcement for a long time. Authorities in Toronto only in 2017 acknowledged and began investigating the case of a serial killer who chose only gay men as victims, despite years of reports about missing people in the city's major gay district. Fortunately, investigators used every tool available, including evidence connected to gay dating apps, and relied on cold cases. But the fact that it took so long is yet another example of the cold and calculated reasoning of a psychopath when choosing his victim. Because the main goal of a psychopath is to kill as many as possible and for as long as possible. In high school, we had a kid who was just completely unhinged. He would jump out of the second-floor window because he didn't like the teacher. He ran away from home. He was expelled from a Catholic school for drawing satanic symbols with his own blood. He was expelled from a military academy for marching on the junior cadets with a Nazi ceremonial sword. Most people who knew him thought he was crazy. A few years later, when I started college, a friend told me what the news was saying about my hometown. A local resident dug up a grave to make a hookah out of a skull. Guess what it was? When I was 7, I was obsessed with Barbie. One time, she grabbed my favorite Barbies and Ken and threw them under the bed. I stuck my tongue out at her and started crawling under the bed to get them. While crawling, my arms began to hurt. It felt like I was being pricked with needles with every movement, and I started bleeding. I crawled halfway to my toys when I realized what my sister had done. She was a psychopath. She had spent the entire morning sticking pins into the carpet so that when I crawled, they would pierce my skin. Then she tricked me into crawling under the bed. Anyway, I crawled halfway to my beloved Barbie and Ken who were by the far wall, and I was faced with a choice. Either I give up with minor bleeding, leaving Barbie and Ken there, or I go through the pin field like in a Saw style and get them. Clenching my teeth, I decided to go all the way. If you're reading this, go to hell.
Thank you very much for watching. In the comments under the video, write the moment when you realized that the person you knew was a real psychopath. And don't forget to check out our other videos. Bye for now.